You've probably heard thousands of definitions of time and consciousness, ideas from scientists, philosophers, psychologists, and spiritual teachers. But today, I want to share a perspective that stood out to me, a definition offered by a contemporary philosopher who approaches time and awareness from an entirely different angle. Before I present his view, I'll briefly introduce him for those who may not be familiar with his work. Rupert Spira is an author, artist, and contemporary thinker whose work centers on the study of consciousness and the nature of human experience. Unlike many spiritual teachers, he does not offer techniques or practices. Instead, he challenges the fundamental assumptions that shape our understanding of the self, the mind, and the world. From the standpoint of philosophy of mind and perception, Spira argues that consciousness is not an inner state or a psychological condition, but the shared field in which all experiences, thoughts, sensations, feelings, and perceptions appear. He questions the assumed boundary between the observer and the observed, and this challenge forms the basis of his unique perspective on time and awareness. One of his well-known statements encapsulates his view clearly. Consciousness is not something you have, it is what you are. Among his major works, the most widely recognized titles include The Transparency of Things, Being Myself, The Nature of Consciousness, and the two-volume collection of dialogues titled Presence. Rupert Spira currently lives and works in London, where his conversations on the nature of experience, awareness, and the mind have become influential within contemporary discussions on consciousness. Spira's view on awareness. Now we turn to Rupert Spira's understanding of awareness, a perspective that not only differs from the common narratives, but also forces us to re-examine the entire framework through which we have been thinking about consciousness. In Spira's view, awareness is not an inner property of the mind. It is not an event, a state, or a mode of perception that switches on and off. He does not consider awareness to be something the mind produces or something the body experiences. Instead, he reverses the starting point altogether. Rather than asking how the mind becomes aware, he asks how experience appears within awareness. For Spira, awareness is present prior to every experience, prior to thought, memory, sensation, and even conceptualization. That is why he argues that awareness is neither a product of the mind nor dependent on the body. Awareness is the constant field in which all experience arises, and without it, no experience could ever appear. He presents a fundamental question. If awareness is always present and never absent, then at what point does the sense of a separate self emerge? This is where Spira's view diverges from most mainstream theories. He suggests that what we call the individual self, the supposed owner of thoughts, feelings, and the body, is a constructed illusion shaped by language, memory, and the mind's habit of dividing experience into separate parts. In simpler terms, for Spira, awareness is not a phenomenon. Awareness is the background of all phenomena. And this small shift in perspective radically alters how we understand the world and the mental image we call me. Rupert Spira's view of time. In Rupert Spira's view, time is not an independent dimension of reality. It is the result of mind's tendency to fragment experience. Time is not something that flows in the world. Rather, it is a cognitive construction that appears when the mind divides the seamless immediacy of experience into the artificial categories of past, present, and future. Spira begins from a simple but rigorous point. Every experience occurs only in the present moment. The past cannot be experienced directly. It appears only as a memory arising now. The future also cannot be experienced. It appears only as an expectation forming now. For Spira, the mind breaks the continuity of experience into separate parts in order to organize and make sense of the world. This very act of fragmentation generates the illusion of time. Thus, time is not an external feature of reality. Time is a mental process. But the core of his perspective lies deeper. The illusion of time is rooted in a more fundamental illusion: the belief in a separate self. Once the mind imagines a me distinct from the world, it must also imagine a timeline on which this me moves, from a personal past to a personal future. Without this narrative of separation, the construct of time loses its foundation. In Spira's view, experience is always and only the present moment, but the mind invents a stored past and a projected future to maintain the story of the individual's self. He concludes that time is not a basic feature of reality, but a conceptual framework created to preserve the sense of separateness. When the separate self dissolves, time collapses as well, leaving only the uninterrupted, indivisible flow of what he calls presence. Now here's where things become truly interesting. Understanding the connection between awareness and time in Rupert Spira's philosophy. I'd like you to listen to this part with a bit more focus, because grasping it requires a small but essential shift in how we normally think. To understand Spira's link between awareness and time, we must start with a crucial point. Time only makes sense to a mind that believes it is separate from awareness. In other words, time appears when the mind imagines a self who stands apart from the flow of experience. According to Spira, what we call time is actually the distance the mind creates between two imagined entities, the experiencer and the experienced. Once this mental gap is in place, the mind is forced to invent a timeline to explain change, a line on which the past self, the present self, and the future self seem to travel. But what happens if this separation collapses? What if the experiencer and the experience are not two different things? This is where Spira's perspective becomes transformative. When awareness is understood as the underlying field of all experience, time loses its fundamental status. At the level of pure awareness, nothing moves and nothing passes. Experiences simply appear and dissolve, always within a single borderless now. This is why, in Spira's view, time is produced by awareness mistakenly identifying itself as a separate self. When this sense of separation fades, experience returns to its original condition, a continuous, indivisible flow occurring entirely within present awareness. Spira repeatedly emphasizes that time exists neither outside nor inside us. Time remains meaningful only as long as awareness is confused with the mind. Once awareness is recognized as the ever-present, unchanging background of experience, it becomes clear that time is merely a conceptual narrative invented by the mind, not a fundamental feature of reality. Before we end, I'd like to share one simple but important reminder. Understanding ideas like these isn't easy without some background. Thinking about awareness and time, without letting our old beliefs interfere, especially the ones we're attached to, is challenging. But the value of this kind of inquiry lies exactly in that challenge. If you'd like, feel free to share your own thoughts or perspectives with us, not to agree or disagree, but so we can look at these questions from different angles and learn from one another. Until the next inquiry,